Selectmen's meeting. I'm going to call it to order, and currently Tuesday, February 20th, 6:30 p.m. I want to inform the audience, as required by open meeting law, you are hereby informed that the town will be video and audio taping as well as live broadcasting this public meeting. In addition, anyone in the audience who plans to video or audio tape this meeting must notify the chairman prior to the start of the meeting. Nobody, if you join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Anybody for weekly briefing?
Sharon Flieger, wastewater. I just want to make an announcement because it seems as though there's some confusion about when our meetings are, all right? We're holding meetings the first and third Tuesday at 8:30 in the morning here in the Griffin Room, and the third Thursday at 6 p.m. also here in the Griffin Room. So that, the public is welcome. We're trying to address as many questions and concerns that they have, making an outreach between the town and the people. We are projecting sometime in March, having some information on possibly ways of financing. We're going to contact some of the banks, so we're looking to try to address some of the issues that the people have and have some answers. So I just want to make sure, I'm trying to get that information out of when the meetings are. Thanks.
Thank you, Sharon. Just to be clear, that is for sewer information and
Wastewater Support
wastewater.
Committee is the
Right.
name of the group.
Right. Thank you. Anybody else? Any public comments or announcements? Nope. Okay. So, want to move on to the consent agenda, Larry?
Madam Chair, I move the following consent agenda items. A, approve the minutes, February 5, 2018, regular meeting. B, refer large-scale ground-mounted photovoltaic zoning bylaws to planning board for hearing.
Second.
Any discussion?
I have one question on that. Well, it comes back, we're going to go through the warrant articles, aren't we? So
Yes.
I can bring it back then.
Okay. Sure, okay. All right, so, move to approve.
So you have a motion and a second?
Right.
And I call for the vote?
Okay, let's vote. Go ahead, Don.
Aye. Call for a vote.
I
Could you
did.
say,
Go.
all in favor?
Aye.
We already have the motion.
We have the motion, right?
I
So
second
let's
it.
vote.
Aye. All in favor?
Unanimous, aye.
All in favor? Aye.
Third time
All
I
of
might
us.
change my
You'll
Are
mind.
we
get
all
it.
done?
You'll get it, Joyce.
Yeah, I'm not good at this.
4-0,
Okay.
unanimous.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, so public hearings and presentations. Public hearing, application for pledge of license and transfer of annual common victual all alcoholic beverage license from Lanto Harwich Board LLC, DBA Lanto Dylan J. Murphy, manager to BLM Restaurant Group Incorporated, doing business as Lanyard Bar and Grill, Benjamin Porter, manager at 429 Route 28. Are you going to read the public hearing?
Yeah, you can have the clerk read the public.
Public hearing, right.
Notice is hereby given under Chapter 138 of the General Laws as amended, that application has been made to this board for a pledge of license and transfer of annual common victular all alcoholic beverages license now held by Landho, Harwichport LLC, known as Landho, 429 Route 28, Harwichport, Massachusetts. Dylan J. Murphy, Senior Manager, to BLM Restaurant Group Incorporated, known as Lanyard Bar and Grill, 429 Route 28, Harwichport, Mass. Benjamin Porter, manager on the following described premises located at 429 Route 28. We know the address by now anyway, don't we? Harwichport, Mass. Indoor area, 5,817 square foot. Restaurant with 3 entrances, 4 exits. Outdoor area, 648 square foot patio area with outside seating. Total indoor and outdoor seating is 495. The Board of Selectmen will hold a hearing upon the application on Tuesday, January 20, 2018, no earlier than 6:30 p.m. in the Don B. Griffin Room at Town Hall, 732 Main Street, Harwich, at which time all interested parties will be heard. by the Board of Selectmen, the local licensing authority.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hi, good evening. My name is Matt Kelly. I'm the attorney and a member of BLM Restaurant Group, and this is Ben Porter, the principal of the group and the manager of record. Lou Malzone's here as well, our third business partner. We're happy to be here tonight. I do have the notices, the certified mailings from the surrounding neighbors. I believe we got everybody. The application, as you know, is pretty comprehensive. We're happy to answer any questions that you have in regards to what we're trying to do. It's a transfer of liquor license. I think the board is pretty familiar with the location, as we joked. I believe the 400 Club opened at that location back in 1969. It's been an operating and functioning restaurant and bar since then. We hope to keep up that spirit of, a community tavern and hope to see everybody there. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have for myself or for Ben.
Do you want to start, Don? You have any
Yeah.
questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We don't have in our packet everything you probably have submitted, so this is just a quick question. Does the license currently, by the land hose owners, is it pledged
Currently, as it's constituted by the land hoe?
currently?
No, the land hoe, my understanding, and I don't mean to speak for them, but I don't think that they had a pledge. I don't think they had financial, I think it was a cash sale at that point.
Okay, and you are asking to be able to pledge the license?
Right, I think, I had met with, and there was certain language that I think, historically, the selectmen have asked to be inserted into any pledge, sort of acknowledging the fact that, it's up to you who gets a liquor license in town.
I'm just asking because I'm going to make a motion that'll include that language.
Okay, and we appreciate that. So I actually took the form that Ann gave me, Ben gave it to the financial guys at Cape Cod 5, and that exact language was inserted into the documentation from the 5, so.
I'm good.
Okay. Janelle?
I don't have any particular questions except for entertainment. And I know last year we went through as a board and we changed the bylaw or the policy for outdoor entertainment. And I can't remember if Land Ho at the time was included in that outdoor entertainment. If they, I don't remember if they had it or not.
It is kind of fairly traditional practice, though, that the liquor license gets approved first, and then the other subsequent licenses, the outdoor entertainment, would be submitted separately.
I see,
So
okay.
that would come up at a future meeting if this is approved.
Okay, it was more of a logistics question if you were gonna offer it.
Well, I'll defer to Ben on that, but.
What we're trying to do is continue on the tradition of that space, whether it was the 400 Club or the Land Ho, and just a fun, convivial atmosphere for locals and year-round people. And so Dylan has kind of explained to me what works for him and what doesn't. And some of the entertainment stuff won't stay, but a lot of it will. And I especially think in the afternoons in the summer, it might be a great spot to have entertainment. I don't know how late we would go. I mean, obviously, we would abide by all town bylaws
Right.
freely and willingly, but
Sure, and, I've had a lot of conversations. I think we're pretty familiar, the members of our group, or the concerns of the Harwich Port Regulations, 10 o'clock outside. We don't have a traditional outside space, but we'd certainly be adhering to all those things. I think we've come a long way on that front. We don't intend to upset that apple cart, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So,
Great, good luck.
thank you.
thanks.
Larry?
Mine's a related question, but we'll come back. The outdoor seating that's there now, you're going to maintain the same outdoor seating arrangement?
Yeah,
So
that's
basically,
the plan.
there's
Yeah.
no change.
Yeah.
And that has to go with, I think, follows up Nell's question as well.
You'll see on the plan that's submitted, if you got our plan.
I
think
did, yeah,
The way
but
it's
I-
currently set up is for 24 seats outside. That seems to be a comfortable amount of seats for that space, so,
Okay. No, I'm, with everyone else, good luck.
thank you.
Thank you.
So, one other thing, we just want to point out that the chief is,
Yeah, I was gonna just,
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
we have had, each time a license comes in, it's reviewed by Ann in the office, does a lot of the licensing as the licensing clerk. So she has reviewed and believes everything is in order. And then on the liquor license, it really goes to the quality of individuals that are doing business, and we usually rely upon the police department to make sure that the people don't have any criminal background. So we have received an okay from the police chief that the folks that are coming in are reputable people, at least no criminal record in terms of that. So there's no objection by administrative staff. I would like to point out, just as we are having some discussions on these licensing topics, that you will start to see where, under the Alcohol Beverage Control Commission, that they usually have us do the square footage in each location. One of the other things that we're trying to do internally is to try to match up the number of seats to the number of people that are approved for the septic system. So we are gonna start to kind of put the number of seats as it relates to the septic system, so we can kind of organizationally all be on the same page. That does not mean that in outside areas where people can congregate and there's no seats, that then you have an occupancy load, which is a different animal, really a building inspector's department. So we are looking to try to coordinate all town agencies to have an occupancy load for the building department, a seating capacity for the liquor license, and a seating capacity that will match up hopefully with the Board of Health. So we are trying to do that internally, because those numbers can be different, and most often are different, when you have people that are in an area that they can congregate without any seats.
Yep, go ahead, Don.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm assuming, though, that that would come up as an issue for the issuance of the Vittler's license itself, not just for
Correct.
the alcohol.
Yeah, correct.
And then the appropriate language, I see that it was noted in the
The pledge
information.
language would be included on the licensing
Right.
documents.
And it's in there. All right, good.
Pursuant to the board, and
wanna
it
ask
didn't sound like there's any
Public has
objection.
comments
No.
for or against.
Does anybody from the public have any comments? Would anybody like to speak? No? So close.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to make a motion to approve the transfer of license from Landho Harwich Board LLC, doing business as Landho, Dylan J. Murphy, Senior Manager, to BLM Management Group Incorporated, DBA Lanyard Bar and Grill, Benjamin Porter, Manager. The facility is located at 429 Route 28, Harwich Port. This approval, however, in this approval, however, the Board of Selectmen expressly reserves any and all rights it has to suspend, revoke, not renew, or otherwise regulate this alcoholic beverage license under MGL Chapter 138, 1 et al.
Thank you, Don. I think
A
prior
second.
to taking that vote, don't we have to close the public hearing?
Yes.
And close the public
Yeah.
hearing first, yes, sorry.
I just seconded it, so then we can vote after
Yeah,
you
we'll do
close
that
the
after,
public
so,
meeting.
okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and close the public hearing. Now, what Don said.
Yeah, what he said.
And I seconded it, so we can.
Okay. All right, any further discussion?
I'm just curious why that language has to be part of the motion.
Because,
If
I mean,
it's-
I held a liquor license when I had my store. You're not allowed to sell a license. It can be, upon the approval of a Board of Selectmen, used as a pledge, a guarantee for a loan. But you have to have this language that we nonetheless have superiority in the hierarchy above the bank.
Mhm.
That if we chose to revoke the license for cause or whatever, that we still have that right, even though it's been pledged.
Right, so we're doing it for business purposes, but we have the power
We have
in the end.
no necessarily inkling that we're
Right.
going to do that, but we reserve the right to do that.
No, because we commonly do it. You're right.
Okay, so we've got a second and no further discussion, so let's take a vote.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
When is
Thank you.
opening day?
I'll defer to Ben on
We're shooting for mid-March. We gotta, the state has to do their thing with a license, and
Yes.
we've got to do some painting and stuff, but
And-
we'll
and to
keep everyone posted.
picking up
Okay.
But we're hoping mid-March. We'll see how it goes.
Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Put those two together as a motion,
Okay,
because I know she's going to ask.
so new business. Municipal stormwater drainage update, Bob Caffarelli, our town engineer. Sure.
These aren't what they used to be, and I'm basically lazy if a house sitter. If I can stand or sit, I'd rather sit.
Well, we're glad we understand that.
Don't expect us to stand.
Well, I have 33 slides here, and I'm going to try to go through them pretty fast, because I don't want Ray and Charlene to get mad at me for keeping them here for a long time. And it says, pretty dry, it's pretty boring, the drainage MS4 requirements. In fact, I might even fall asleep, and I'm the one doing the presentation, so if you hear some snoring, you know, wake me up. This is, the MS4 requirements are permitting requirements for discharge of our wastewater. They're under the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System. They come from the Clean Water Act. First Clean Water Act was adopted in '72, and in the '70s and '80s, EPA found out that stormwater also impairs our bodies of water. So in 1987, they changed the Clean Water Act, or they added regulations to control stormwater for industry in large cities. Phase 2 regulations were adopted in 1999, and to regulate stormwater in urbanized areas in which we are one. And they call it the MS4. The 4 S's are municipal, separate, storm, sewer system. That's what the 4 S's stand for. And even though it was adopted in 1999, the permit was first issued in 2003. It took them that long to establish. So Harwich was under their first general permit. It's a general permit for all the cities and towns in Massachusetts that came under the urbanized area of under 100,000, which is based on the census. Now, we've been under the permit for 2003, but effective July 1st, 2018, we come under an updated permit, which is stricter than our older permit. It was supposed to be adopted in, supposed to be effective 2016 in July, 2017 in July, but they extended it a year because they felt the towns weren't ready to implement the new permits. These are the regulated communities: Pittsfield, urban area, Springfield, of course Boston, and most of Cape Cod are regulated under the MS4 EPA requirements. P-Town and Truro are not under the regulated areas. This is Harwich. All of Harwich is regulated except for a little section north of Route 6 there, and west of, they call it Pleasant Lake there, but it's Hinkley Pond, basically because there's nothing there. But basically the entire town is under the MS4 regulations. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean all of our stormwater discharges and all of our roads are under the regulation? No, it's only roads that discharge into catch basins which discharge into a body of water, which is only about 5% of the town. We're lucky that we're in Cape Cod that has very sandy soils, so most of our catch basins discharge into a infiltration basin. They don't discharge into a body of water. So that makes it a little easier for us. This is a town, and south there you see all the squares. This is our effort to determine all our discharges for our stormwater system. Discharges to daylight is what they say, which discharges into a body of water in the Commonwealth. And last year, we tried to identify more discharges. So this is a map developed from 2017, which identifies a number of other discharges. So if you want to know the extent of the MS4, as of now, we've only identified 23 discharges into bodies of water: Herring River, Allen Harbor area, Witchmere area, Saquatucket, Red River Beach, Bank Street and Carding Brook has one, Bank Street has one. And there are 5 beach outfalls in the old campground area: Ocean, Seabreeze, and Zilpha. Mm-hmm. So quickly, this is the end of Zilpha. It's hard to see, but oops. Okay, there it is. There's a pipe there. There's a pipe there. This doesn't even have catch basins. It's just open pipes. And there's the open pipe. So the road drains directly into culverts, which, you see the culvert there, drains into the beach. Mm-hmm. Now, one question I had in one of the seminars these culverts outfall onto a very porous beach, so the water only goes about 10 feet. It doesn't even get into the body of water. I mean, does this apply to MS4? And his answer, and it's from EPA, he said, well, if there's any question whether it applies, assume it does. So, okay. This is Allen Harbor. Or Witchmere, yeah, that's Witchmere, yeah. Yeah, Allen Harbor was, the Allen Harbor 4 or 5 years ago, the water all the way from Route 28 came down Harbor Road, and there's a church up there, and all of that discharged directly into Allen Harbor. Under the ERA program, I designed an infiltration system, which is a series of dry wells under the pavement there. This area here is so close to the elevation, it's only 1 to 2 feet during high tide, so we couldn't control the small section. So this still discharges into catch basins and into the harbor. So we couldn't eliminate these two small outfalls, but we eliminated like 90% of the water that went into those outfalls. Also, last year or 2 years ago, we redid the pier, and the pier goes into a large concrete oil water separator. So this is basically controlled as much as we possibly can control it. Now, what I'd like to tell you that with the 23 outfalls, this would be very easy to put a catch basin, grade it so all the water goes into the catch basin there, and we put a dry well there. If we do that, we automatically eliminate 2 outfalls, so that's 2 less outfalls that are regulated by MS4. Little by little, as far as I'm concerned, we can eliminate all of them except for the ones that are so close to the groundwater, like in Witchmere. So I think we can get to a point where we only have a handful of outfalls that are regulated by MS4. But it'll take some money. This would probably be $10,000, $15,000 to eliminate these 2 outfalls. I think we've done all we can with Witchmere and Allen Harbor. I think it was 2 years ago I designed the infiltration system in the middle of the harbor, so all that goes in, and again, I think I was able to control about 90% of the water that went directly into
Bob, you
Allen
may
Harbor.
want to expand on Witchmere a bit, because you had to take out a failed attempted.
Yes, I think that's there too.
Just a historical, because people might be interested in.
You can see it right there. Yeah, we tried earlier, before my time, they put in some sort of gravel system, but all the water was going into there and directly out this outfall. It's a duckbill outfall, so that just never really worked properly. But the infiltration system, there's no place for it to go except for there, so that works properly. Now the new, the 2003 MS4 permit remains in effect until the new permit becomes effective. Now, new permit is supposed to become effective July 1st, 2018. It was July 1st, 2017. Now, I've been in a seminar recently, and the EPA said that could be, it could be effective any time now, or it could be effective after that date, because they have lawsuits on both sides suing them for extending the date a year, and there are other lawsuits wanting to extend it beyond July 1st, but as of now, the effective date is July 1st, 2018. And it's a permit period of 5 years. I believe the 2003 was a 5-year permit too, but they kept on extending it. So that might happen with this one. Now, the first thing that is due is we have to submit a notice of intent within 90 days after the effective date, which is July 1st. So somehow we have to get to EPA a notice of intent by October 1st. We also continue with the annual reports every year, and I think I put in your package an annual report. Every May 1st, I have to get an annual report to EPA, which details what we've done the year before to comply with our MS4 permit requirements. Everything there is what I have to put in the report. Now, the notice of intent that's due October 1st, this is the elements that are required in the notice of intent. There are things that I think I can handle. I should say it's very arduous, and, I'm going to need more staff and, a pay raise to do it, but actually, they have a template, so I can pretty easily get it done. It'll take me some time, and it's not, it won't be immediate, but it's something that I feel very confident that I can do. I don't want to do it until after the date is it's implemented and in effect, so I could just do it once and submit it. EPA they have a 30-day public notice for it before they adopt it. Also, within 1 year, we have to submit a stormwater management program, and these are the things that are required for that, and I see no problem in getting that completed within a year from the implementation date, so it'll be due June 30th, 2019. Now, other requirements are the MCMs. MCM means minimum control measure. Now, a lot of these are what we have to show that we're doing for the current permit. They come a little more strict with the new permit. Public involvement, bylaw prohibiting illicit discharges. That's the IDDE program, illicit discharge detection and elimination. I'll get into that quickly. But these are the minimum control measures that we have to show that we're complying with for our MS4, and on a yearly basis, I have to report what we've done to comply with these requirements. That was year one, the things we have to do. Year two, this is what we have to do, but basically they're minimum control measures. Public education and outreach. We have to send out brochures for public education and get public involvement into the stormwater program, educate the public the problems with stormwater and what's involved in control the stormwater and what we're doing to control stormwater. IDDE is illicit discharge detection and elimination, and I sent some regulations that are supposed to be adopted prior to the implementation of the new regulation July 1st. So we're hoping to get those into the next town meeting. Construction site runoff control, that's later on. Post-construction site runoff control, good housekeeping. Those are regulations that I have in the stormwater regulations that I gave you. So those aren't as immediately needed as the IDDE regulations right now, as far as the MS4 requirements. This is the minimum control measure 1. It's a 5-year permit. Develop public education outreach plan, year 1. Distribute public messages for all the years. Minimum control measure 2. Develop public involvement plan. Heinz and Amy has programs where they have people clean up the streams, the edge of the streams, that type of thing. That's, part of this. We get credit for that, and I put that into the report every year. Provide opportunities for public involvement. We have to be a little better in doing that. We've been a little lax in the last few years, but with this new regulation, we should get more effort into public involvement, public education and public involvement. Illicit discharge detection and elimination program. They get really heavy into that, but as I said, we have 23 outfalls. Now, there may be more outfalls. I have to, Hinkley Pond, Long Pond, I have to look at that area to see how many outfalls, if any, are there. But our outfall map is pretty much complete, other than the lakes on the north of Harwich. And then we have to rank the outfalls, and they say interconnections, that's sanitary sewer overflows, we don't have any of those. Dry and wet weather screening, I mean, in cities, if you see toilet paper, you know, outside an outfall or in the bottom, and, you know, in towns that I've been director of public works, I have seen that. That's a dry weather screen, and then you know maybe there's something connected to that stormwater pipe that shouldn't be connected. But again, in Harwich, and we have to identify high priority outfalls, priorities that have a high probability that there's going to be an illicit discharge connection to there. And frankly, I don't see it in Harwich. So the IDDE program, we have to have regulations to identify IDDE and to be able to issue a fine if we find someone who is discharging pollutants to the stormwater system. And the IDDE program that I have, that I proposed, and most towns do, it's IDDE for all of the stormwater systems, because we don't want to pollute our groundwater either. But as far as the MS4 permit requirements, they're only concerned with the ones that have outfall. But I don't see any problem. Here's a 10-year schedule. It's identifying outfalls that have a potential for pollutants being discharged into them. Again, when I was in other towns, we did have areas with very poor soils and leach fields that were failing, and then they would connect a pipe, an overflow pipe from their leach field into the nearest catch basin. And but again, I don't see any high potential areas for this town where illicit discharge should be a problem. But we have to, it has to be approved by EPA. If we say none of our discharges are a high potential and we don't want to do all this extensive study, then, you know, they may agree with us. So again, you know, my concern is the expense for implementing these regulations for the town. Now, these are bylaws for sediment control, written procedures for site inspection, all those things, and we need those for year one, after year one, so we're talking 2019, but all of those are in my regulations for stormwater. It should comply with all those, but we don't have to have those till a year off from the implementation date. And bylaw regulate. These are pretty much the same thing. As-built drawings, requiring as-built drawings from people who are disturbing over an acre. And again, that's the second year and the fourth year. But that's also in the regulations that I developed. The last one, identify 5 permittee owned properties for retrofit. Now those, and that's year 4, but in the seminar I went to, they said as long as you do it after the implementation date of July 1st, 2018, then that could be credited for your year 4 requirement. And as far as I'm concerned, the low-hanging fruit, I mean, we can easily eliminate a number of our discharges, easily 5 of them for not much cost. And we would comply with that for probably after year 2. We would comply with the 4-year requirement. This facilities inventory and written O&M procedures for all of our facilities that we have to investigate all the facilities, but as far as I know, it's facilities that have the runoff runs off into a body of water. Our biggest facility is the DPW facility there, and I don't believe that. I think it's all infiltration. I don't know if any of it goes into a body of water. You know, that's what we have to investigate in year 2. And if we do find any facilities that discharge into a body of water, we need to develop a stormwater pollution prevention plan for that facility and written O&M procedures for control of the water. Catch basin cleaning, we're required to clean all the catch basins every year. Street sweeping required to, now, there is wording that they may require street sweeping twice a year instead of once. Now, I was worried, okay, you might need another person in the highway department if you have to sweep all the streets all year round, but I asked in the seminar, it's only the streets that drain into catch basins that outfall into a body of water. So that would only mean we'd have to sweep 5% of our streets twice a year. So the more I looked into this, the more I said, well, it really, financially, really shouldn't impact the town of Harwich too much. Things that we can do to implement the regulations. Now, I am going to have to get the outfall map, finalize it, and then do the GIS, the longitude and latitude for every outfall and for every catch basin that goes in the outfalls, and we're supposed to be putting in the GIS map. We have a couple of years to do that, so I don't think there'll be a problem with that. What we should do, and I think I have in the yearly report, that we do have a stormwater group. It's DPW conservation planning, the planner, Amy for conservation, Hines, I have Hines in the group, Board of Health. And we really, we have the group, but we really haven't met that often, if at all, in the last few years. But we do have the group, but to implement the public education and public involvement, and, you know, I'm an engineer, I'm not a public involvement, you know, kind of guy. So I think quarterly we should have the stormwater group meet to make sure we are implementing the MS4 requirements properly. And I think probably the selectmen should probably have a liaison, and because we have to do more than what we're doing right now. As far as public education, it might not be a bad idea to even put this PowerPoint on the town website. I mean, that's something that I can put into our stormwater report on May 1st that we've done to educate the public. And also, I've been meeting with Cape Cod Stormwater Collaborative. It's an informal group now, but I know you guys have a meeting, I guess in March. The selectmen's a big selectmen's.
Yeah.
You're going to be, they're going to propose to you an intermunicipal agreement for the Cape Cod Stormwater Collaborative. And I strongly suggest that you consider it and get involved in the Stormwater Collaborative, because that'll help us to comply with all of the minimum control measures and with the stormwater pollution prevention plans and notice of intent, because we can all get together, and it just makes the job a lot easier, because in Cape Cod, we're very similar, all the Cape Cod towns. So when you see intermunicipal agreement, strongly consider that, because that'll be a big aid for the town to comply with the MS4 requirements. Funding options for, there are a handful of communities that even set up a stormwater enterprise. Some communities charge an added charge for the water uses for stormwater. For Harwich, I don't see any major expenditures. So we're doing with property taxes. I think we can mostly continue to do it through the departments. You might need a little extra manpower. But again, from what I've seen to date, and it may change, I don't see any major expenditure requirements for Harwich. So this is a big summary what Harwich needs to do. Complete the outfall mapping. We're in the process of that. Develop the IDD general approach regulations, develop required bylaws, investigate funding opportunities. There are a number of funding opportunities, but to tell you the truth, again, I don't see any major expenditures for the town. Year one, I have to submit the notice of intent, prepare a stormwater management plan, and update our IDDE plan to comply with whatever the new regulations are. And hopefully we'll have our basic IDDE regulations in effect. Year two, complete detailed system mapping have to identify the longitude and latitude of every catch basin and outfall, initiate the IDD catchment investigation procedure. Hopefully that won't be extensive for us because we don't have any high potential illicit discharge outfalls. Municipal O&M plans, depending on how many of our facilities, discharge into a body of water. That might not be a big effort either. Prepare town garage, stormwater pollution prevention plan. I think we should have a stormwater pollution prevention plan and probably an O&M plan for all our facilities because, again, we do want to protect the groundwater, but I don't think that affects the MS4 permit. That's it.
Thank you.
Too long.
Just to add a couple comments. One, we have been providing in Bob's budget some assistance in consultant dollars, so he has had the availability of working with a consultant to keep us up to date in terms of the submissions that we need to make. We did also submit in the capital plan for a couple years out about $250,000 to cover the estimated $10,000 per the 22 locations. So that was included in this year's capital plan for out years. And then we had a conversation this afternoon with the town attorney in regards to regulation versus bylaw. Because the Board of Selectmen last year at town meeting were designated as the sewer commission for purposes of doing the wastewater project, within that or under that umbrella is stormwater. So we will be preparing the regulations on this IDD as well as the stormwater elements, and we'll present that in the form of a regulation for the Board of Selectmen acting as sewer commissioners to adopt prior to the deadlines that we need to meet. So just as upcoming attractions, these are things that we have been building. I appreciate Bob kind of taking the time to go through and give you a sense that this is something that's been in the works for quite a while, but now they're getting far more serious about actually implementing it.
Any questions, Larry?
Well, thank you, Bob. Good presentation. And Chris, you already, I think, helped me with one of my concerns was, did we have to hustle to get something in the town warrant for bylaws? But it sounds like we take our role as sewer commissioners and we can do it regulatory wise. And as long as we hold our public meetings and so on, we're okay. Bob, a comment first, and that is that I appreciate your presentation. I thought it was very good. This is very important to us. It actually ties into our comprehensive wastewater management plan.
Yes.
It's an action that we've told the EPA and all the people that worry that might bother us that we're taking the steps we can do to fix our storm drains, push catch basins in, and prevent it. So it's I don't want to overstep that. It's an important thing we're going forward. Let me ask you a question. Over the years, I don't know if complaint is the right word, but we've had concern of the state fixing their catch basins, say on Route 28. Do they pick that? Are they doing some of this, paying for some of this that's on a state road, or
Well,
are they bailed out?
we aren't responsible for discharges. We're actually not responsible for even private road discharges. So even if it's private, a lot of our roads are private. So if there's a discharge that doesn't come under our MS4 permit, it's just.
But we're still in the position of trying to pressure the state to do their.
Yeah, well, the state,
job is,
the EPA is trying to pressure the state
We're not.
too.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Don.
please. You can
Actually, I was
clarify
going to say this later anyway. I mean, sometimes there's good news about government, and it's way ahead of the curve, and it can be done in a frugal way. Before 2004, the state was most efficiently channeling almost all of its water right into the abatements along the Route 28 corridor. They undertook complete road replacement at that point. We had Matt Amarillo, who was the then commissioner of Mass Highways, come down, and all the catch basins that had been designated as outfall pipes originally, they were changed to dry wells when the repavement got done. Now, they've got the mapping of anything that might have been missed in that, but that was a subject of before, because they have a moratorium after they do their road pavement, we're not allowed to open the road again. They addressed that the last time they did a total road replacement.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think there are still catch basins that we were after the state to go.
There may
do
be
it.
a few that were left,
There's more
but they
that
would have the mapping
go
of that.
directly into Saugatuck and Wishmere Harbor, for instance, that we're trying to get the state to fix. Yeah, it's been so, they haven't been responsive, I guess is the kindest way of saying that.
It was actually all piped into the harbor. There was an elaborate network originally.
I'm just thinking the currently.
Yeah,
There's
I think that link referenced some
Yeah,
catch
just,
basins a
they're
while.
And that's the
definitely-
part I'm concerned about based on this,
Yeah.
on
Not
the
that many.
wastewater management plan that
Yeah,
we promised.
there
we would.
definitely are some. We walked the stretch, I probably walked 3 or 4 times, the 28th stretch over by Herring River, the West Harwich. We have a design plan already been submitted,
Right,
and included in that, I mean, those catch basins are so overgrown, they haven't been touched in literally
Yeah.
20 or 30 years.
Right.
But that will be part of the update as we move forward to make sure that they do get those compliant.
And that's my other comment, because you have a responsible for program management, in other words, a schedule. And, you know, based on these requirements that you show us, those are gonna be based on illicit, whatever the term is, bad actors.
Yeah.
And for my money, I would like to have them prioritize, at least as much as possible, tying into our CWMP. So we're removing the nitrogen and phosphorus that we're trying to get after. From a local interest, that's probably more important, because I don't think we have that, as you said, I don't think illicit,
Yeah, I don't think we have illicit.
I don't think we have a problem there, so.
Discharge, yeah.
I'm hoping when you prioritize this, so we go after the nitrogen, phosphorus.
Yeah, yeah. Again, you can write, these are just minimum requirements. You can write anything you
We
want
can make it
into,
right, yeah,
into your regulations, right?
okay, that's fine.
Janelle?
I don't have anything. I thought it was very comprehensive. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Bob. I just had a couple questions in terms of, so I understand, obviously, we're trying to look at this to minimize the amount of money for the town.
Right.
So in terms of the NOI that has to be filed, we're working with conservation and everybody to help you file that, but does the consultant help with that as well?
If, I do have budget, Chris put in 20,000 for professional help if I need it, but I only use it if I need it. I think with the addendums, they have templates that I could fill out. You know, I'll have to look at CWMP, you know, I have to identify the impaired waters and, you know, exactly what's going into the impaired, that type of thing. So there's gonna be research, but with the Cape Cod Collaborative, we get together and we're gonna have a meeting before the NOI. They're gonna have a standard NOI that should be applicable to most towns, and you just, you know, fill in the blanks, which is applicable for your town. So I don't think, I mean, if I do feel the need for a consultant, then I would use them sparingly. I do have the money, thanks.
Yeah,
Chris putting it in my money, but, you know, I spend public money like I spend my money, you know, I have a little scotch, my name's Caffarelli, but I got some scotch in me too, and so, you know, I'm pretty cheap, so.
I do think too, just from discussions with Bob, you know, one of the things that we're looking at is it is really changing out the catch basin itself. So most of the time, it's gonna be stuff that we're gonna be doing in a parking lot or adjacent, and just make sure we separate, so water goes into the environment and the bad stuff stays in the catch basin. So a lot of times, he does submit usually on our behalf for different projects and parking lots. So where it's 22 in individual locations, that will probably be part of the overall capital budget request. And we can certainly put a few dollars in there if we want to try to accomplish it all at once to have some assistance. The consultant perhaps assist us in that effort.
Go ahead, Larry.
I think you said this, and so, but just to clarify, going forward then, this will be part of our operating budget, will be the cleaning of the basins that because sometimes it's come back. I think we've had discussions recently of some basins not being cleaned as rapid, you know.
Yeah, I think in terms of.
And that's probably a continuing line item to maintain. Is that how you're thinking going forward?
Well, it's a good question. I guess my short term, which is really over the next 3 years, is we need to make sure that we have money for the consultant to make sure we keep our reports up to date. And then Bob did put into the capital plan for, I think it's 2021, I don't remember the exact date, but 200,000 or 250,000 to do the 22. So once we do all that initial work, then we will have to come up with an ongoing maintenance
We
plan.
need a line item.
So we will have to
an
look at
annual
that
cleaning,
piece.
because that's what's got us into some problems in the past.
Yeah, but for the MS4, you really, I am gonna have to identify all the catch basins that the highway department's gonna have to concentrate on.
Right.
Because all the catch basins, the 5% that go into the, I think we have 600, 700 catch basins, and they're treating them all equal. They're gonna have to concentrate on that 5%, which discharge. They have to inspect it more than once. The sump shouldn't be more than half full. It's a 4-foot sump. Once it gets above 2 feet, you know, it goes out the pipe. But the good thing with MS4, it's not all the catch basins. It's the ones that discharge to daylight. But again, since it's only 5% of the catch basins, it shouldn't be too much of an added effort to the highway department. But they are going to have to make a more concentrated effort on those catch basins that discharge to daylight.
Go ahead, Don.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, while it may not be subject to this requirement, I mean, pollution's pollution. It just a little bit more to Larry's initial concern. While I'm confident that they replaced the majority of them, I'm not sure which ones they didn't do, and we might want to get a mapping. They did not remove any of the pipes, but the pipes aren't connected to most of those storm grates anymore. So we kind of have to know from them, and it's really their responsibility. Although, I don't know how many of you, when's the last time you saw the state come down with a truck and clean a catch basin?
I refuse to answer the loaded
Yeah.
questions.
But, I mean, we're only responsible for municipal. Now, if they discharge it into our municipal system, which goes in the outfall, then we are responsible, but I don't think that there are any of those. So,
Thank you very much.
okay, thank
Okay,
you.
it wasn't as boring as you threatened.
Yeah, I didn't fall asleep either.
Okay, under new business, we also have the B stretch code update and other green communities elements. Ray Chesley, Building Commissioner, and Charlene Greeno, Town Planner. Yeah, I can't say it, I always, doesn't matter how many times I try.
Good evening, and thank you. Charlene Greenhouse for the record, the town planner, and
Ray Chesley, Building Commissioner.
Sean Libby is also part of this. However, he was not able to be here this evening. We were asked to provide an update of, a brief update of what the process for green communities is, and where are we in that process. You have seen presentations on this before by Seth Pickering, so I will try not to go into too much detail. But there are 5 criteria that must be met to qualify. One is an adoption of a by right siting for renewable or alternative energy sources, expedited permitting, energy baseline and 20% energy reduction plan, fuel efficient vehicle policy, and then what we call the stretch code. Criteria 1 is the as-of-site writing. The planning board voted on February 13th to forward to this board a zoning bylaw referred to as the large-scale ground-mounted photovoltaic bylaw. What this does is it creates a new bylaw that is an A by right. It adds it to the use table, and it also adds a solar farm overlay district to the zoning bylaw and the zoning maps. This evening, I found out that the board did vote to refer this back to the planning board, so that hearing will be scheduled for March 27th. We weren't able to get it on the March 13th because of the dates in which it has to be published to meet the criteria necessary for zoning amendments. Just a reminder that zoning amendments do require a 2/3 vote at the town meeting. So again, it's to create the by right article, add it to the use table, and add the map. And this is the area that we came up with, that we are recommending. The planning board did look at this the other night and thought this was a pretty good idea. Let's see if I can do this right. This is where the existing solar farm is right now. So what we did is we looked at the area just to the west and north of the existing site, and we actually came up with just under 9 acres that could potentially be used by the town for future creation of a solar farm. It can be done by RFP. There's a number of different ways that the town can go about doing this. It would be an as of right, but it would be through an RFP process or some other kind of procurement mechanism that would meet all necessary criteria. Item number,
Before you move on, can
Yep.
I ask a question on this? Because some of this drifts over to the warrant article discussion.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask this. On the as-right, you list the IL, the industrial limited, I guess, is
industrial zone, IL is industrial zone.
industrial zone.
Yes.
And you have the one site located, but there are another 2 or 3 industrial zones.
This is, this is an overlay, if I may, this is only an overlay of a portion,
So even though the warrant article says industrial zones,
because
it's
that,
specific enough.
it's specific if there's an additional footnote that says it falls under the overlay district.
Okay, so this won't expand into other areas?
No, it could at a future date if town
But it'd have to go
wanted
back
to
to town
allow.
meeting
It would
to,
have to go back to town meeting. Another community where I worked, where I was actually the Green Communities Coordinator up in Truro, we had a by right siting area, and then we also had a special permit siting area
Okay.
that allowed for large-scale vote.
I just want to be sure it was
Yeah.
clear, because you listed in the warrant article, it's going to be industrial zones. but then you only list
Because
one
that's where the
map.
overlay is located. There are several other overlay districts that if you look in the use table, for instance, in the CV zone, there's also a village commercial overlay district,
Right.
which
Okay,
overlays a
Okay.
portion of that.
got it.
Zoning can be very confusing and also kind of boring. Criteria 2 is expedited permitting. The large-scale ground-mounted photovoltaic within the solar farm overlay district will provide for wording in there that it is a expedited permitting. We will also need to have, however, a letter from town council, just reiterating the fact that once this bylaw is approved, that it will be an expedited permitting procedure. Criteria 3 is the energy baseline and the 20% energy reduction. This is where Sean Libby comes in, and he's helping tremendously with this part of the project, along with work that the Energy Committee has already done. The Energy Committee, just over 2 years ago, did have what's called a portfolio-wide building assessment completed by the Peregrine Energy Group. And they looked at a number of buildings here in the community. Albro Brooks Library, the ball field, Station 2, Community Center, the golf course, the main fire station, the police station, the highway barn, the cultural center, town hall, and the water department facilities. We will be working with the Southeast Coordinator, who is Seth Pickering, who you all have met before, and the Mass Energy Insight website. And what that does is it breaks down the energy uses, either electric or natural gas, by department. Right now, however, a large chunk of our energy uses is shown as null, which means it hasn't been dedicated to specific departments. We know what which departments pay that bill. We just need to call that out and put it into the right pocket, so that we can see what each department is actually using. We also need to add in our vehicle, whether it's gasoline or diesel usage. And that's something that I think we can do very cleanly, because I know the highway department keeps strict track of that. The fob that you use when you fill your gas tank, the town gas tank up, says which department it gets allotted to. So we already have that in. We just need to dump it into that Mass Energy Insight. We also need to look at what we want to use for a target date for our baseline. We would love to be able to go back to 2014 because we put all the new streetlights in, which reduced our energy costs tremendously from the old streetlights because we went to LED. We can't go back that far. We're hoping we can go back to 16. There was some hope that some of the newer buildings like the school and the tech school would add, be a benefit. We don't get to count those because we don't have jurisdiction over those. The Paragon Plan did make recommendations on a number of different energy saving initiatives that the town can do. A number of those have already been completed. There's still a number of those on the docket for this next year as well as going the next few years into the capital plan. So those are some items that we can look at moving forward. Criteria 4 is the fuel efficient vehicles. I know in past years this has caused a little bit of angst. One important thing is police cruisers and heavy-duty vehicles of 8,500 pounds or more are exempt from this. That is most of your DPW fleet. It's all of your fire department fleet. And energy-efficient vehicles, a two-wheel drive vehicle that gets 29 miles per gallon is considered a fuel-efficient vehicle. We're not looking at hybrids. We're not looking at electric cars. We're not looking at those. Although if we do become a green community and we have grant money available, we can use some of those monies to offset. So if we did want to buy some hybrid vehicles and a normal gas vehicle costs $25,000 and a hybrid would cost $30,000, we may be able to use that $5,000 towards the difference between the two types of vehicles.
So if we buy police hybrid vehicles, then we can stay with our existing policy and transfer that to
if it meets,
department heads. And
if
it'll
it
still
meets
will
the
meet our
criteria,
and
if
not
it
have
meets
to
the
buy new
criteria.
cars.
And there are some departments, not so much in New England, but out in the West, that are actually using hybrid vehicles for those types of uses. Criteria 5 is the stretch code, and this is where Ray will start to talk a little bit. But the stretch code is the adoption of the BBRS stretch code, which is part of, and it's appendix to the state building code. It's important to point out that this would only affect new residential construction. So if you're putting an addition onto your home, it wouldn't count towards that. And it only counts for commercial structures over 100,000 square feet. That's a big building. So the chances of that, us hitting that with a commercial building are pretty slim. The stretch code is a general bylaw. The language has already been submitted for the warrant. This only takes a majority vote, not a 2/3 vote. And Ray's going to explain the subtle differences between the existing code and what the stretch code is.
Okay. Just to start from the beginning, Harwich is currently under the 2015 International Energy Conservation Code, which is the national code that's adopted by the state, and all of the communities in Massachusetts subscribe to that. It's a state requirement. The stretch code is an enhancement to that code, generally. And what it calls for is a target savings in energy of about 20%. So when a community adopts the stretch code, they're actually using the base code for a lot of the requirements, but they're also using the stretch code, which is calculated in a little different way than the base code. The base code is a prescriptive code, so it tells you how to achieve, what you have to do to achieve a passing grade in the energy, in energy conservation. So for instance, an exterior wall of a house would have an R21 rating under the base code. In the stretch code, they change it up a little bit, and it's what's called a performance code. So they analyze the different components of a structure and find ways to average them together. There's a formula, and they can average them together. So you may not need an R21 at the exterior wall. You might have a more efficient heating system, which offsets that requirement. So while the base code is prescriptive and you do what it says and you pass, the stretch code is a performance-based code, and you hire what's called a HERS rater, which is a heating equipment rating service. And these are people that are trained in energy conservation, and they work with the different builders to help develop the construction of the building and to achieve the particular rating. Currently, that rating for residential is a rating of 55, which is 20% below what a typical house would be with the base code. The base code would be a rating of 75. So the difference between the base code and the performance code, if you have the base code at 75 and the performance at 55, it's a 20%. So that's how they achieve it, and that's how the code works. As far as an impact to us, I think it's really just getting used to a little different process. A lot of cities and towns do have adopted this code. There may be some additional cost to some of the builders. For instance, you would be required to hire a HERS rater, and that cost might be on a single-family house, $1,000. I'm just guessing here, but in that range of whatever, maybe a little bit more on a commercial building. Again, as Charlene said, it's pretty much based on new construction and not existing buildings. They're pretty much exempt. So that's the basics of the code.
And I know that when we were going through this up in Truro, and I know the information is available on the Green Communities website, you know, the $1,000 you may be paying now for the HERS rater, you'll make up in energy savings in the next, like, 2 to 3 years. It'll pay for itself, and then continue to pay for itself in the energy that you will be saving as a homeowner falling under the stretch code. So the green communities, once you're designated and you're ready for grants, there's money. Once you become a green community, you automatically get an allocation, and the base of that is $125,000. Because Harwich it's based on population as well as per capita income formula. So we would be receiving our initial payment or grant of anywhere between $140,000 and $150,000. If we were to be approved this year, we would get the money in October. They have awarded over $80 million in grants total for both designation and competitive grants. There's actually a competitive grant that closes right now, March 5th. We don't qualify because we're not a green community. Different types of projects that are being funded include electric and thermal, both natural gas and fuel oil, energy conservation measures, incremental costs for hybrid vehicles, and grant administration costs. We don't really have to worry so much about grant administration costs at this point because the Cape Light Compact is working hand in hand with green communities on the Cape to do the reporting that needs to get done on an annual basis, which I wish that happened when I was in Truro because it does take a lot of time. There's a lot of checks and balances that you need to do, but it certainly was well worth it. Even Little Truro, I think they've gotten upwards of close to I want to say like $400,000. It might even be more than that. And that money goes a long way. There's all kinds of other incentives that we are eligible for now, but will be even more so if we do become a green community. We've got a great partner with the Cape Light Compact, and I know up in Truro, they would offset the cost of other projects, which made it eligible for us to get even more money towards other projects. I mean, it can be things like new windows, insulation. There's a number of different energy efficiency measures that can be taken. And that's all we have.
Thank you, that was excellent. You want to open it to questions, Don?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The building side is terrific. I'm just curious on the vehicle end of this thing, because it's set up to be the increment between what the purchase price is. The purchase price of some of our vehicles is zero, because we have this unstated trickle-down policy where we get
And
these
those are the-
cruisers going.
Through you, Madam Chair, those are the only vehicles that would truly be affected by this. You wouldn't be able to recycle police vehicles unless they met the low mileage list that I provided on the slide. Then you could reuse them. But what we have right now out there are all the old Crown Vics that probably get about 12 miles per the gallon. So those are the kind of things that you'd phase out eventually. If we become a green community in October, we don't have to touch any of those vehicles until we go to do a replacement.
Okay. But, I mean, even the fire chief is a repurposed Explorer.
Those are somewhat exempt because of the type of work that they are doing towards that. So, you know, there is some repurposing that is allowed from one type of department to another, but going from the police department to the building commissioner, that would no longer be acceptable.
Yeah, we did have a discussion with Seth when he came out, and he basically said, you know, and obviously when he walks in, he sees all the Crown Vics, those as they cycle out would have to be changed.
But, yeah, I've objected to it because if you do the math, it makes absolutely no sense. You're buying a new car, the expense, and whether it's financially or environmentally, we put very few miles on these cars. And so you run those through and you look about the total, you know, recycling costs of a new car versus I'm not gonna fight it, but it's not logical. It doesn't meet the smell test to do this.
Well, out of a
Per
fleet
se.
of, I mean, we probably have close to, I'm guessing, 100 vehicles in this community. I think we're talking 5.
Yeah, I'm just saying it doesn't, if you had a high usage, it would make sense. You're saving lots of gas.
Well, one of the things we've also discussed is that, does every department actually need its own vehicle? Obviously, building department does because of the number of inspections that they do. But other vehicles can be easily shared amongst departments. So the town engineer has their SUV. And it may be that we actually need SUVs for some of the inspectional services. They've got to go to places that they can't go. I know, for instance,
We've been stuck a number of times.
yeah, Ray
with the
uses his
Crown
own,
Vics.
yeah, Ray
Thanks for
uses his
sharing
own
that.
truck. Yeah.
We have the builders push us out.
Yeah, I mean, and Ray has used his own four-wheel drive truck to do inspections.
Right.
So, I mean, if I have to go out and do an on-site, and I know I have to go someplace
You can push
hairy.
yourself out, right?
Yeah, no, I'll ask my
Yeah.
husband, can I borrow your truck? Because I'm not gonna take my car someplace I know I'm not gonna
Right.
get it out of.
Right.
So,
It
you know.
overall makes more sense as we go down further. I mean,
Absolutely,
gotta
and if
save
you have a
money.
brand-new vehicle, it's gonna last even that much longer. I know that was a big debate that we had up in Truro. Granted, Truro's a lot smaller, but we were recycling police cars just like you are here. And when the green communities went through, we decided, you know what, let's just get rid of all the old Crown Vics, let's buy a new fleet, and for us, it was only 3 vehicles. It was actually, excuse me, it was 4 vehicles. But we ended up buying 2 SUVs, because we needed the 4-wheel drive, especially out in Truro, and then we bought 2, I think we bought an Echo and a Taurus. And, you know, that was back in 2009, and those vehicles are still on the road now in 2017.
Janelle? Are you all set, Dawn?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Janelle?
Okay, I just have a couple questions. The 9 acres, is that private land? Or
That's town-owned property.
That's
That's
town-owned.
town property, yes.
And is any of that, like where the treasure chest is right now?
No.
No, so it's
Completely,
to the side of it?
yep, vacant land. We looked very careful to make sure we didn't utilize any space. We originally were looking to the east of where the existing photovoltaics are, but we had things like that. We had the compost pile, and we had this, and we had that, and we were like, we really don't want to separate them because we can utilize some of the same facilities that the existing solar farm uses, the pole, the voltage, whatever, I'm not a,
Transformers.
thank you, that thing, the transformer. So we can utilize those better with it to the west of the existing. But it is all on town property.
And then, going back to the fuel-efficient vehicles, I was just thinking about the Council on Aging and the buses that they have.
That buses are exempt. That would be
Okay.
exempt.
They'd be over the 8,500.
And it's it's not a single-person vehicle.
And what about the rec department with their passenger vans?
Same
They're
thing.
too-
Yep.
Okay. I think that's it. I, for some reason, thought we did not need to meet all 5 criteria. I thought it was 3. No?
You have to meet them all.
You have to meet all.
I think one of the things, to
You
the
said
point
that.
though, because I was gonna bring this up, that 2 of them require going to town meeting, so only 2 require going to town meeting. That's what you have on the warrant for the renewables as of right, and then the stretch code. The fuel-efficient vehicles is just an acceptance of a policy by the Board of Selectmen. Expedited permit is a letter from town council saying that we can submit, when people submit permits, it could be completed within a year. And then the energy baseline is just a plan that's submitted by Sean Libby into the folks at the state.
Yeah. I mean, it would have to come here and get approved, but basically, it's not going to be much different than the Peregrine report that was done 2 years ago.
I think what it was that I was remembering was the 3 was that 2 things were already basically done.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
You good?
Yep.
You good?
No, I have a couple questions on the stretch code. I know the $1,000 isn't, a big deal in the scheme of things. This may be an idiot question, but if we're looking, is there an exemption for affordable housing or anything of that type that would allow?
Actually,
trying to
it's
control
funny,
costs that,
It's funny you mention that, because a member of the Energy Committee, who I think is here, actually sent an email out to Seth Pickering, because there was at one point, it was indicated that it was only for houses over 3,000 square feet. That's how it was originally written. He asked for clarification on that. We've not gotten that clarification as of yet. But even then, I know that, and again, I have to use Truro as my example, we did have a duplex that was affordable rental, actually did go with the stretch code, and actually is one of the only platinum LEED homes on the Cape that's actually affordable housing. What they save in energy costs, they would do again threefold, because spending that extra $1,000 for the HERS rater, because of the energy savings that they're
Yeah.
seeing now.
I'm not actually
It
questioning
paid for
that.
itself.
I'm questioning that a lot, let me not exaggerate. Getting a down payment to buy a house is a limiting factor for some people getting into it. So even though it makes sense long-term, it could shut people out of that ability to get there. So that was my, the stretch code came up to us several years ago. I think we had we didn't like it because of the extra expense. And I think those, correct me if I'm wrong, but the expense of the base code and the others kind of come together, so it's not.
They
Big deal.
used to leapfrog each other, and now with the 2017 stretch code and the 2015 base code, they're pretty much in line with each other.
So
They're pretty
therein lies
close.
my concern. In one of these, maybe it's the article, it says that the stretch code can be changed every 2 or 3 years.
Well,
And
you,
so
you,
is this a
you-
moving target that if we buy into this now, all of a sudden we could
Well,
fall into a trap?
it
The
does
building
change.
code changes every couple of years, and you have to go with what the building code says.
The
So if
the
we-
building, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. You're probably going to ask my question. I'm just wondering do we have to automatically accept that going forward if something happens and they go crazy and it goes up a lot?
No, you can choose to terminate the stretch code. I don't know what that does to your green.
Yeah,
The
if we
green
opt out of
community.
this, if we vote to
You can opt
disband
out.
Let's assume
it,
that
then we're not
let's
a green
assume they're
community.
rational people and they won't automatically go skyrocket, but if,
Well, the way the codes work in Massachusetts is every 6 years. Massachusetts is 3 years behind when the codes are published. So right now, they're publishing the 2018 codes, but Massachusetts, as of January 1st, just adopted the 2015 codes. So we change codes every 6 years, is how we do it. And when we change codes, it can happen more often, but that's just the way it has been. And when we change codes, they will update, when the energy code changes, they will change the stretch code, most likely.
Right. Oh, sorry. Did
Yeah,
you-
one other point.
Two points.
Hold on,
Oh,
Larry.
sorry. Okay.
2 points in that connection. Larry called Harwich Energy Committee Chairman. There is separate from the building construction code, there is an energy efficiency code that's updated every 3 years, which affects the building code. And the other thing is, if we adopt a stretch code, then we're obligated to any future upgrades in the stretch code.
Thank you. Sorry, Rick.
You do get some Energy Star savings possibly, because of some of the stretch code, requirements, and when a HERS rater puts it together, he keeps that in mind. So it kind of offsets some of that cost. So when I said $1,000, I'm just kind of.
Right.
And that's a point I wanted to make. We have ready to prepare for you sometime a couple of slides showing the costs and the benefits with a natural gas heated home, 25,050 square feet, or a propane heated home. And the benefits over time outweigh the upfront additional costs, which aren't very great to begin with.
Thank you. I think that overall, that working in some of this field, I don't think that there is a massive difference between what is currently required and what the stretch code would be. And to your point, it takes several years to get to the next round, and sometimes even then, it's constantly delayed. So you get an adequate amount of time. And in terms of even a first-time home buyer, I think that really the banks and such would be looking highly upon new construction that was using a HERS rater, because the overall savings and the better product that you're really building. I mean, I think that more and more towns are using the stretch code anyway, so that builders, and I can't speak, for everybody, I know in my daily world is that more times than not, you just plan on it, plan on using it, because usually it's required.
If I might, actually, far more communities have actually adopted the stretch code without becoming a green community than there are communities that are a green community. So
Right.
it's a little interesting that, communities have done that.
Right. And I just had a question, or just really not a question, but just to point out that we've got different types of, projects that we could be looking, for assistance and grants with, furnaces and things like that could really, in the end, save us a lot of money, and give us more money in our budget. So I think it's a really good presentation. Thank you so much. And we have the bylaw draft and.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there going to be questions, you think, on the large scale? Do you want me to,
You want to hang out for
stay?
the next thing is the warrant, so.
are you going by one by one?
In real time,
Because mine are like 40-something.
just like a town meeting.
No, we're not gonna
No.
discuss all the warrant articles.
Yeah, I didn't,
Let's just hit the highlights.
yeah, I didn't know if you want to, just to,
I think that's.
because I think last time I did go through each each
Yeah.
individual one, and maybe just to touch upon a couple that people may be, and these numbers are obviously subject to change, but number 11 and 12 are budget adjustments for 18 to fund the snow and ice deficit. This means that we don't necessarily have to call a special town meeting. We did put Article 13, which was later on in there, in which we have a lot of long-term debt authorized. And we actually, for instance, the Muddy Creek project was $6 million, $5 million of which was grants. But under Mass General Law, we have to say we're going to borrow the full amount, even though we're getting grants. So we don't need that $5 million anymore. So that is being rescinded. So those elements are contained in 13. That is something that we should get in the practice of doing every so often. It's just good for the bond rating to get those off. The wastewater, obviously I had mentioned before about phase 2, the 3 communities, Dennis, Harwich, and Yarmouth. On the sewer enterprise fund, I did make that change that it would put in money into it and it would stay in there as a retained earnings. So I appreciate the comment at the last session. I don't know why I hadn't thought of that before, just a lot of moving parts sometimes. The water department, I think those are pretty much the same as before. DPW, same as before. Fire. On the cemetery department, the transfer of land is still needed. We did merge the construction of the pet crematory and to fund the equipment for same, so we converted that into one instead of having 2 separate. I don't know why we broke that 2 separate. On another one, it's actually the pet burial ground. They were going to put regulations in. Under our rules and regulations or under our bylaws, when you make changes to the cemetery commission for human burials, that requires town meeting action. Because it's a pet burial ground, it's just administrative, so we do not need to have a bylaw for how we're going to govern that. Golf, there was no changes. And I recognize that we have now provided language, so you have the language this time. I probably should just say that up front. I had covered those topic-wise last time, but not language. On number 30, to accept the grant for Saquatucket Landside, so we do have that in there. The lease for the restaurant at Saquatucket, I know the chair wanted to talk about that at the next meeting. The Monomoy Regional School Agreement, my understanding is Chatham voted that down, so that may go bye-bye.
Yeah.
Officially or unofficially, I don't know how to say it, I probably should say it that way. The 2 green communities, you just heard the 2. Marijuana, we do have the language. Just on the marijuana, I know the town attorney was a little bit concerned that the language that they had submitted was slightly different than the language that the planning board had discussions with.
The language is actually the same, it's how it was presented is different. So he asked me if I was okay with how he wanted to do it. I said, as long as the Attorney General's okay, I'm good. Because it says the same thing, it's just how we presented the language.
Okay, so maybe we can catch up
Yeah.
tomorrow and just go through that. And just on the order of that, it was the ban for zoning, the ban for general bylaw, and then if those 2 don't pass, then it would be a as of right, I'm sorry, not as of right.
Time, place, and manner.
Time, place, and manner. I asked you to put time, place, and manner in there. And then a temporary
ask a-
moratorium.
If, it would be my suggestion that after the 2 ban, the zoning bylaw and the general bylaw, then the moratorium. You want the moratorium before you do the time, place, and manner, just because of the wording in the time, place, and manner bylaw.
Okay.
Good idea.
So we can switch that around. On the charter bylaw, let me see, I think we did add on the composition of the town agencies, the reference to where they are. If there's additional changes that are needed, please let me know, as I could see by the shaking of the head.
Can I ask for a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
My chairman of the planning board asked if, based on that language, if alternates for the planning board were being eliminated.
It's coming up. I'm going to be talking about that in addition to a couple other things.
So are they going to be eliminated
Oh,
or
no.
no? No, good, that's all I need
No.
to hear.
Because I have a question too on that, so, in progress.
Go ahead, Chris, and then
Okay,
we'll go
the
back to that.
next one, and we do have a separate item on this, just the new Harwich Affordable Housing Trust on more of the membership. That's a separate article, but we just need to determine what the membership is, so there's a suggestion in there. The special legislation on the liquor.
Chris, can I just,
Hold on, why don't we just run through it so we can finish that and then
Yeah,
go
and then
back?
if you want to go back and,
Yeah.
and
I think
it needs to be
it's easier.
tweaked. We still have 2 weeks to tweak, so.
oh, mine was only a grammar thing. So
Okay, all right.
If you want to just circle and then give it to me,
I
or
will.
let me know. On the, let me see, the liquor license, on the senior work-off program, we have had some discussion in terms of that. I think there was a little bit of confusion on how this was being administered. I think we've now corrected that. The senior work-off program can be done in addition to the senior exemption. So on that, there is some language changes, though, on the senior work-off that they had previously, that the person had to do the work themselves. They call it the angel provision, that if someone wants to come in and help that person out, they could do the work. So just as a for instance, if you have somebody who is, quite honestly, 95 years old and just limited to how much work they can help with the town, they could have somebody that wanted to do an Eagle Scout project or somebody of that nature, or a neighbor or a grandson or a granddaughter come in and do the work on their behalf, so they still get the credit. So we are putting that language is now in there. On the create the supplemental senior exemption, that is my recommendation to remove. We had tried that 2 years ago, and that special legislation was not ever adopted. I think part of that was the state legislature did increase it on its own to 1,500. It was 1,000 and went to 1,500. So that's something that I think the request was to go from 1,500 to 2,000. But where before the special legislation was submitted and never acted upon, it doesn't really make sense to continue down that road, is at least my suggestion. If the legislature gives us an indication that they will go higher, then that's something that we should monitor. The personal property tax for the National Guard, that's once every 2 years. The decommission of the Architectural Advisory Central Ave is just a clearing of the title through eminent domain. There was some issues came up. That sale is pending, but there was an issue with the ownership, so this clears the title. On the community preservation, we were able to consolidate the different articles that were under 50,000. I think now that those votes have occurred, we've been able to get the language, so some of this stuff is newer from what we had before. The 48 is the reserve appropriation. That's kind of necessary to do, and the fund the land bank. Actually, I think 47 is going to move down a little bit, just sequencing-wise. And then those projects, the same projects that we have on the capital plan that the CPC, Community Preservation people, had voted. Private petitions are, 3 of them are the same. I think I had mentioned the promote the town of Harwich through the chamber went from 25,000 to 30,000, so a slightly larger, and that has been accounted for in the budget. And the Pleasant Bay Alliance, the IMA, and the Pleasant Bay Resource Plan update, which is the MOU to extend that, is in there. And then the revolving and stabilization, just on the revolving authorization, last year we had to create a bylaw to say what these were. We did add 2 last year, so we need to update the bylaw to add the 2 in there. And then we will have to list off the spending levels for that year. So that second one has to stay in there. Those we are going to flip-flop to. Council said you should do the bylaw first and then set the level second. And then as per the board's last vote, we got rid of some of those compensating balances, and we did leave herring fisheries as the final article.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Okay, on to,
Some
sorry.
questions.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were good. No, you're not good with all of those?
It's not good.
Go ahead, Don.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hate to come off as snippy here, but since every change since I arrived on the scene for the charter or bylaw amendments is wound up being changed from KP Law, I kind of feel like I should be on retainer for them, because there's substantive problems here. I mean, one of them, Charlene had noted, because we appear to be structurally changing the planning board at the same time as we're creating an internal conflict, because there is language when you talk about the planning board later in the, because that's where we changed the number in the 7-10 of the bylaws. 7-10, as it currently reads, has alternates. So, I mean, if this were to pass, which part of this wins? There are a couple of others like that. I never presupposed last year that we were going to delete the numbers from the charter and then come up with just a table. I thought we were going to alter the actual paragraphs that pertain to them. Some of them had the right numbers in them, but some needed to have a clarification, and this ain't gonna cut it, because there's a couple of really big mistakes, primarily with the planning board. I mean, it doesn't actually, if he read a little further in the bylaws, he would have found that this is not consistent with what already exists in the bylaws. So it's gonna have to be changed again.
But I guess I would suggest that, if Don, you want to come in and we can go through
Yep.
and
Well, and
make those
Sandy.
suggestions, and Sandy, we can
Yeah,
get
don't
certainly,
leave
is
out
that primarily
conservation.
Article 40, though, you're addressing, or other?
Yeah, I mean,
ones?
it's great, it's a placeholder, but this isn't gonna work. So there has to be something other, which is kind of like where we're always at this time of the year, is they write something and we rewrite it, and we pay them.
What happened to the alternates for the Board of Health? That was an idea brought up, I think, 2 years ago.
We rewrote the charter relative to the desire of the Board of Selectmen, to the extent that there wasn't a regulatory prohibition. I mean, like, the alternates on the planning board don't enjoy the exact same privileges as a full member. So to the extent that they were allowed under law, we rewrote the charter to afford for that. But you're right, it doesn't show up here. Again, I gotta break this whole thing down with Sandy Hall, who's now the chair of the Charter Bylaw Review Committee. It has a placeholder, so that's good. I mean, in the final language, it apparently isn't due for 2 weeks, so we can.
Well, there's a couple options, just thinking about it. Certainly, if this is within the confines, if the moderator was okay, and we wanted to have each individual reference be changed, so we can certainly do that in the motion.
Oh, gosh.
But I think that maybe if we sit down and there's certain ones that are okay the way it is, then we can keep it. If there's certain ones that we need to add language.
I think the language route, because it's horrible when you change a motion and people are sitting there with a pencil going, okay, wait, but there was paragraph 7, section what?
Right.
But I think we have the.
Doing bylaws or zoning bylaws or charter changes by motion amendment is like a really
Yeah,
bad
no,
idea.
I hear you.
Well,
The
do we
warrant
have-
needs to be done by March 5th, so
Yeah.
we need to
If it's
schedule
March
time
5th,
to
then
get
we'll
together.
sit down and work on it.
Okay.
Okay. So,
But it's Article 40 is the.
As it currently stands, it is more confusing than it is helpful, so it has to be redone.
Are there any other articles, though, related to the charter, I guess what I'm getting at?
No.
Just this one?
No, it's
Okay.
it's just this.
Okay.
well,
That's enough, though.
could we go back to KP and have them look at the whole thing and then,
That has historically been a sloggy kind of.
okay, so you'd prefer to go and sit and,
I'm
that's fine.
fine with doing it. I
just-
wrote the last
I
3
think
of
we need
them.
local knowledge on this one.
Yeah, no, I think that's fine. I was
Yeah,
just
he
trying
stopped
to make
reading
it a
too
little
soon.
bit easier,
Yeah.
so,
You're right, he stopped reading too soon.
right,
And
right.
He didn't do it anyway. I mean, he delegated it to another associate within the firm. So
Okay,
they're
so
not,
you think
they're not familiar with either our bylaws or our charter. So
Okay.
it's better that we do it.
we'll do it. Okay, so you think there'll be adequate time?
There will be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to sit down.
I
with
just
Dawn.
needed to alert you to the fact that what you're seeing here isn't going to fly.
Maybe the beginning of next week, we
Yeah,
can sit down.
fine.
Anything else on this?
Are there any other
Not on this, I have other questions.
Okay.
language changes, or?
Well, I'll let Janelle go
Yeah,
first.
Janelle.
So I just have a couple questions. Where are we about on the RFP for the harbor for a restaurant? I thought maybe we were gonna bring that back to town meeting, the last meeting that we actually had with John Rendon here. I thought that was kind of,
Well, I guess I'll answer that 2 ways. One is, I think you should have a full board discussion.
Yeah.
And we did draft, I did draft a placeholder article, Article 31.
for the lease
One
of
of the
the
things
snack shack.
that's necessary is to do a 40-year lease,
Right.
and that does give us the ability to do a 40-year lease. The question does it make sense to draft an RFP, try to hurry up and get an RFP out with a contingency that maybe town meeting votes it, or have town meeting vote the authority to do a 40-year lease and then do the RFP afterwards? And to be perfectly honest, I don't think I ever got clear direction from the
Right.
board in terms of which direction you wanted to go on that.
If I might, because this addresses that, my conversation with the town planner was that the parking figures she gave were not preliminary. She took it straight off of the parking bylaw, and she said those are final numbers in her mind.
Yeah, I do believe that for the next the next meeting, that there is a request to have that discussion on.
Yeah.
So we can have the town planner, she left, that was quick.
Wise woman.
She left when the getting was good. But yeah, we can have a discussion, because, quite honestly, I am concerned that it probably doesn't fit. And, we do have an obligation, in my mind, a legal obligation, that we presented at town meeting, the snack shack. And I think changing that and not having a snack shack is something, that has the vote of not only town meeting, but also the ballot, the folks that went to the ballot. And that's a pretty significant standard in my mind, versus, I'll get myself in trouble, but versus people who have come and have presented a concept, but that concept really hasn't seen, the town meeting floor, or quite honestly, been before the electorate.
And we were gonna discuss this in full
But I
next.
think that would be, a topic
It's-
for
And
yeah,
Charlene's
it's on
gonna come
next
in and talk
week's-
about
it's
parking.
on for next
Yes,
week.
we'll have Charlene included in that, and include the parking discussion
Yeah.
in more detail.
Okay, and then the other question I have was just more of a logistics question. Is it public knowledge yet what the offered amount for 4 Central Ave, or the agreed upon sale amount is?
No, actually, the Board of Selectmen took that under advisement, so I would recommend that if we want to have a discussion in regards to that, that would be something we do in executive session, because it's still a pending sale and not an actual sale.
Okay.
But this has nothing to do necessarily with the amount.
Yeah, I
It's
know.
just a defect in the title.
Right. But I actually didn't agree with selling that. If you can
I know.
remember, I was the one,
I do.
the one vote no. So I was
It's always
just,
bad for an administrator to have split boards.
so I'm just curious.
Every day.
The fact that now we're asking to take it by eminent domain is interesting for me, for my position.
And strictly to clear the title.
Okay, that's it for me.
Good. Larry?
I think my questions have pretty much been, they were with the cars and with the stretch code I was concerned about. I think, Chris, I would like, maybe next time, but some more justification for the Article 9, the pickup for natural resources, and the, even possibly the transport van of, do we need that this year with all of our expenditures going on?
For natural resource, and what was the
Yeah.
other one, Larry?
For the transport van.
Rec van?
Yeah, the rec van.
If you like, I can have folks come in and speak to
Yeah,
those.
it's $60,000 in the time, and do we-
Article 9?
yeah.
Yeah,
Ron,
we
did
have,
you have
Article
some-
9 has a list
Just some
of the
justification
capital
on
items.
that. I mean, it's probably there, but I'd just like to feel more comfortable with it.
Don had a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before we go past that, because I think it's kind of an important issue, too. It would seem to me that if this were done somewhat differently, instead of taking free cash, that was kind of generated by us not filling the police and fire positions, to be honest with you. Because it resulted in us having money that came to free cash. Why wouldn't we pose those questions, like, do you really need them? And if you really need them, do a debt exclusion on them and put the money towards stabilization, because we were talking about how pumping up stabilization would be good for our rating. I mean, and it would serve two purposes. Just how much do you need this, and how much does the public think you need it relative to all of the competing things? So,
Yeah, just two things. One, the extra money, the money that was in for the positions is actually in FY18, so that's not part of this free cash. It will fall to free cash next year. And to your point, I draft this stuff up, and I believe it, that any cuts that you make from free cash should go to OPEB or stabilization. So I
Okay.
100% agree with that.
and that might jive with what Larry was saying. I mean, if this does not wind up enjoying a super high priority this year with all of the other competing interests, then we could do two
I
things.
would like to strengthen that discussion.
So we'll have that opportunity to have the reviews when we sit down with the various departments.
It's a good point. We can
Right?
do it then.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, because that, actually, one thing too that we haven't, I know we have the March 3rd.
Right.
I had brought up that a couple people want to have an off
Earlier.
night, and maybe if people can think about and get back maybe to Sandy or Ann. I was thinking that if Finance Committee tends to meet on Thursday evenings at 6 anyway, if that works, maybe we could pick one of the Thursdays that they're meeting on the front or back of that, which is probably at the back at this stage, we're getting close to the end of February. But if we could pick one of those dates, that may be good to use for planning purposes. I don't have my,
It's the 1st or the 8th.
is that when
The
FinCom
Thursdays.
meets?
Yeah.
The 1st and the 8th?
Which one's the,
And we meet the 3rd on the Saturday, so
Right.
it would be the
I-
1st or the 8th.
First
I
of the
prefer
year.
the first, because I have a conflict on the 8th.
You have a conflict on the 8th? So the
I'd prefer the
first-
1st too, actually.
Okay.
Me too.
We'll all
So-
conflict together.
Janelle, Larry, and does that work
How about
for?
Julie?
Yeah, I don't know if it works for Michael, but we can check.
Let's tentatively look at the, and so that would be at 6 o'clock at the same time as FinCom. I haven't proposed that to them, I mean, I'm just thinking on the fly here, but do we?
What is
Me
that?
watching.
Well, 4 of you are here, we get a sense for,
8 or 8:30 on the
so
3rd.
The 3rd, 8
Eight.
or 8:30?
I'd have to check.
I don't even
That's
know,
fine,
I
we can
haven't
check
checked the
after.
agenda.
So is everybody good on?
you have
If
more?
I may,
No, go
just,
ahead.
this is very quick. This is on section 140 appointments. This has to do with Housing Trust. It's just a grammar thing. You have on the,
Well, what page, Larry, I'm sorry?
well, it's 180, it's Article 41,
Okay, 41, I'm,
section 141 appointments. This is just grammar, so don't panic.
go ahead, I'm ready.
Oh, well, it says, second line and third line, the section shall appoint 5 trustees, one of whom shall be the town administrator or designee, a member of the Board of Selectmen. You need, and a member of the Board of
I got you.
Selectmen or something, otherwise it
Yep.
doesn't make,
Mhm.
Jess said it wasn't a big deal, but.
Gotcha.
Actually, I think I think it should read.
Okay,
I
so
think it should,
you're gonna make it a
I
big
think
deal.
what he just needs to do
All
is
this
take the
stuff goes
period,
to the-
all
take
you need to
the
do is
period
take the
out.
period out after Board of Selectmen and put a comma there, and then you're all set. You don't need and at all, right?
No.
One of whom shall be the
You
town
have three
administrator
different-
Yeah,
designee.
3 different
A
things, you
member.
need an and an or something in there.
You need an and.
Maybe and,
No, the-
and 3 remaining, and
Right.
the remaining
Oh, yeah.
3 trustees.
Yeah, we'll fix that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
fix
it
that,
can be
yeah.
all one sentence is my point, right?
Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm okay with that, but otherwise you have designee. as a-
While you're on that topic, is that sentence read okay for substance?
Yeah, I was okay with that, I just.
Okay, I know that's under old business, but since we're there,
I know, I know.
Mhm.
Right,
Well-
so isn't, we're gonna be voting on that? Are we
yes,
voting on that
because you
tonight?
guys have had discussion and
Mhm.
discussion, but no formal action on that.
Right.
So I was asked to receive a clarifying vote.
Madam Chair, I would move that we vote to approve the Housing Trust membership makeup as recommended in our packet, the town administrator or his or her designee, 1 member of the Board of Selectmen, and 3 citizens at large.
Second, with the his or her change to what was submitted.
I just
Okay.
put in there town administrator or designee. I got rid of the his or her altogether.
Good.
Okay, good.
Trying to make it more
Could be either.
gender neutral.
Gender neutral. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous vote, thank you.
So that takes care of old business.
Yes, under town administrator's report, I will keep this very brief. Just on we did receive some word from MassDOT. I actually drive the stretch of 6 every day. They've been in the process of changing some of the green signs and just changing out to the more reflective ones, and I think they get a little better, larger lettering. So they are doing sign replacement on the stretch of 6 as it goes through Harwich. So they're putting in the retro reflective sign replacement and upgrades on Route 6A, 28, and 124 from town line to town line, beginning to end. So that work is going to commence, they're saying hours of operation 7 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. So if folks realize or see that there may be work mainly in breakdown lane and shoulder, estimated duration of work 5 months. So
Right,
just
no.
so folks know that there's work going to be done on the Route 6 corridor.
Do we have any guarantee from them that, it will be the 5 months? Because that puts us at July. I mean, why do they do
I
this?
Where am I going?
I think they have a rule that, I know when we were doing the Muddy Creek project, that you can't do anything in the roadway during summer months because of
Okay.
the heavy traffic. So I would be surprised if they're gonna be out there and disrupt traffic during the summer.
Go ahead, yeah, Don.
I said I'd be
This must be
surprised,
snarky night or something, but it's nice that they're replacing the signs on Route 6 with more reflective signs. Are they also going to be replacing the tree limbs with transparent tree limbs?
It is snarky, you're right.
Well, I mean, we may want to talk to them, because I don't care what kind of signs they put in there, there's no sight lines to
Yeah.
them because they haven't done any pruning, so
I know, you're right.
it would have to be a
They're-
billboard.
We're afraid to do pruning after that fiasco up in the upper gate. We cut down all
Well, that
the
was more
trees.
denuding of all vegetation. I mean, but right now, they're right in front of all the signs, and I'm
Oh,
with
yeah,
Julie.
right.
It's like, in July, either A, there's no sign gonna be there, or B, it's gonna be so obscure that it wouldn't matter that they replaced them.
Yeah.
Oh, you can email.
Yeah, right. I'm sure that they're right on it
concludes
with
my
Lee
comments
Clark.
this evening, Madam
Okay.
Chair.
Selectmen's
we are.
report, I can't even talk. Larry?
We've mentioned this before, but I'll mention it again. Chris and I have been attending the Dennis Harwich Yarmouth Clean Waters Community Partnership meeting, and we have a draft agenda. I'm sure it'll be, yes, I might be sending this out soon, but put this on your calendar if you haven't already. We're planning, the boards of selectmen are meeting March 22nd at 6 p.m.
It's a Thursday.
Thursday
I think I put that on my
at
calendar.
the Dennis Council on Aging and Senior Center. And that'll be the boards from each of the three towns,
What time again?
6.
6 p.m.
PM.
And just a very brief, so you have an idea of the agenda. Welcome, of course. There'll be overview of the Efficiency and Regionalization Grant Award. This is what we talked about, the $150,000 grant, and we're getting $100,000 of that for the three towns. Mass DEP is going to review their input to date. We'll have a short review of the CWMPs from each of the three towns. An overview of the cost savings would be expected from working the three towns together, which I think I mentioned one time in the past, and I think Chris has too, is significant cost savings. And then proposed schedule, proposed town meeting article for spatial legislation. We have to do that first. Doesn't mean we're going to go with it yet, but it sets the stage for it so we can, in a subsequent town meeting, actually do the spatial legislation that we need. And then if the board of selectmen all agree, we'll vote on town meeting articles. So we want to have the same article going to each of the three towns.
Okay.
So it'll be I think it'll be an interesting, and we keep talking boring. I don't think this will be boring, actually. Okay, so I'm biased, but just put that in your calendar, please.
And that was Dennis COA, was that
Right.
Yeah. Okay. No?
Yeah.
Oh, are you done?
Yeah, I'm done.
I don't have anything in particular for selectmen, but Carolyn was not here at public comments and announcements tonight, so I would like to make a plug for our community center, the ferry hunt, which my daughter had fun riding her bike around Harwich Center. I wouldn't let her go beyond Harwich Center. Finding the ferry doors and getting her stickers. She was here today at Town Hall, the library, over at the Cultural Center, so that was really fun for her. She was unable to come to the party afterward because, of course, I had to be here and I wasn't going to let her ride her bike in the dark. But yes, my sister dropped it off, so thank you.
That's nice.
Thank you. That was very nice. So, and then also, again, because Carolyn wasn't able to make her plug, I just wanted to remind the public about the Indoor Farmers Market coming on Thursday. Yes. At 3 to 6 p.m. at the community center.
Great. Don?
I think I've said just about enough.
Go
Well,
home.
I want to just acknowledge that last Tuesday I went up to the Seaport Economic Council hearing with John Rendon, our harbor master, and we
Got it.
got the $1 million landslide grant.
In small bills?
Awesome. It was excellent, yeah.
Small bills.
Yeah, it was, I put it in the Swiss bank account. No.
Perfect.
So
Well,
John
thank
did a
you.
great presentation, and yeah, so really, it was really awesome. They took the vote right then and there. It was awesome. So, that's it.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
So moved.
Anyone who wishes to stay.